I always believed I had everything a woman could desire. A stable marriage, a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, and a husband who, although not perfect, loved me. Or so I thought. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my perfectly ordered life crumbled in the blink of an eye, taking me on a path of passion, betrayal, and finally, redemption. It all began a few months ago on a seemingly normal summer afternoon. I was returning home after grocery shopping, loaded with supermarket bags. When I saw him for the first time, he was standing by the elevator with a warm smile and eyes that seemed to penetrate directly into my soul. He was tall, dark-haired, and had an air of mystery that instantly intrigued me. "Let me help you with those bags," he said, extending his hands towards me. His voice was soft, with a slight accent I couldn't identify. "Oh, thank you," I replied, feeling a flutter in my stomach when our hands brushed as I passed him the bags. "I'm Sarah. I live in 5B. "Pleasure to meet you, Sarah. I'm Jack. I just moved into 5A. Looks like we'll be neighbors." At that moment, I had no idea how those simple words would change the course of my life forever. The following days passed with a strange mix of anticipation and guilt. I found myself dressing up more than usual before leaving the house, hoping to run into Jack in the hallway or the elevator. Every time I saw him, I felt a spark of excitement that I hadn't experienced in years. My husband, Tom, seemed to notice nothing. He was immersed in his work as always, coming home late and barely paying attention to me. There was a time when that bothered me, but now I found myself secretly grateful for it. It gave me more opportunities to cross paths with Jack. Our casual encounters became more frequent. A chat in the elevator turned into an invitation for coffee. Coffee transformed into long conversations in the nearby park. And before I knew it, I was sharing my dreams, fears, and frustrations with him in a way I hadn't done with anyone in years. Not even Tom. Jack listened to me with an attention that made me feel special, valued. He looked at me as if I were the only woman in the world, and that awakened sensations in me that I thought were forgotten. The guilt was still there, lurking in the corners of my mind, but it became easier to ignore. One night, after a particularly silent dinner with Tom, I found myself knocking on Jack's door. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but when he opened the door and I saw the intensity in his eyes, I knew there was no turning back. "Sarah," he whispered, and in that simple word, I could feel all the desire, contained for weeks. There was no need for more words. In an instant, his lips were on mine, and I surrendered to a passionate kiss that made my knees weak. His hands roamed my body with an urgency that reflected my own. At that moment, nothing else mattered. Not my marriage, not my vows, not the guilt I knew would come later. That night marked the beginning of our clandestine affair. We saw each other in secret, stealing moments of passion at every opportunity that presented itself. A furtive encounter in the building's basement, a stolen kiss in the elevator when no one else was looking, entire nights in his apartment when Tom was on business trips. Each encounter was an intoxicating mix of excitement and remorse. The adrenaline of the forbidden blended with the constant fear of being discovered, but the connection I felt with Jack was too strong to resist. He made me feel alive, desired, appreciated in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Months passed and our relationship intensified. It was no longer just a physical affair. I was falling deeply in love with Jack. He talked to me about a future together, about leaving everything behind and starting a new life. Part of me yearned for that possibility, but another part clung to the security of my marriage, to the life I had built with Tom. My life became a constant balancing act. During the day, I was the perfect wife, taking care of the house and keeping up appearances. At night, I transformed into the passionate lover, exploring new limits of pleasure and emotional connection with Jack. I lived in two parallel worlds, and it became increasingly difficult to keep them separate. Tom began to notice changes in me. He asked why I smiled more, why I seemed more distant at times. I made up excuses, talked about new hobbies or friendships, anything to maintain the facade. Each lie weighed on my soul, but I couldn't stop. The excitement of my relationship with Jack was like a drug. I couldn't give up. One night, after a particularly intense encounter with Jack, I returned home feeling guilty and confused. Tom was awake, waiting for me in the living room. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and suspicion. "I went for a walk," I lied, avoiding his gaze. I needed to clear my thoughts. Tom looked at me intently for a moment, and I could see the pain in his eyes. Did he know something? Did he suspect? Fear paralyzed me for an instant. "Sarah," he finally said, "I feel like I'm losing you. What's happening to us?" His vulnerability hit me like a punch in the stomach. For the first time in months, I saw the man I had fallen in love with years ago. Remorse flooded me, and for a moment I considered confessing everything. But the fear of losing it all stopped me. "I'm fine, Tom," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just going through a difficult time. It'll pass." That night, lying next to Tom, I couldn't sleep. Guilt was eating me up, and I started questioning all my decisions. Was it worth risking my marriage, my stability, for the passion I felt with Jack? Was what I felt for him really love, or just the excitement of the forbidden? The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to distance myself from Jack, seeking clarity in my thoughts, but he wasn't willing to let me go so easily. His messages became more insistent, his looks more intense when we crossed paths in the building. One afternoon, while I was alone at home, Jack knocked on my door. His face was tense, his eyes bright with determination. "We can't go on like this. Sarah," he said as soon as I opened the door. "I love you and I know you love me too. It's time we make a decision." My heart was pounding. Part of me wanted to throw myself into his arms, tell him yes, that I would leave everything for him. But another part, the rational part, reminded me of everything that was at stake. "Jack, please," I begged. "I need more time. This isn't easy for me." "More time?" he replied, frustration evident in his voice. "We've been playing this game for months, Sarah. I can't keep being your secret. Either we're together for real, or this ends here and now." His words hit me hard. The reality of the situation fell on me like a bucket of cold water. I had been living in a fantasy, believing I could have the best of both worlds without consequences. "I need to think," I finally said, closing the door before he could respond. I collapsed on the couch, tears running down my cheeks. How had I gotten to this point? How had I allowed things to get so out of control? The following days were hell. I avoided Jack as best I could, while desperately trying to reconnect with Tom. But the constant guilt and fear prevented me from being myself. Tom noticed something was wrong, but I kept lying, digging an ever deeper hole. One night, after a particularly tense dinner with Tom, I received a message from Jack. "If you don't tell your husband the truth, I will." Panic overwhelmed me. My entire world was about to crumble, and it was entirely my fault. I spent the night awake, weighing my options, looking for a way out that I knew didn't exist. The next morning, I made a decision. I would tell Tom the truth. I would accept the consequences of my actions, whatever they might be. It was the right thing to do, although it was also the hardest thing I had ever done in my life. I waited for Tom to return from work, each minute a torture. When he finally arrived, I asked him to sit with me on the couch. "Tom," I began, my voice trembling, "I have something to tell you." At that moment, just as I was about to confess everything, the doorbell rang. My heart stopped. I knew who it was, even before opening the door. Jack was there, his face a mask of determination. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, entering the apartment, "but this has to end." Tom stood up from the couch, confused and alarmed. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking alternately at Jack and me. The moment I had feared so much had finally arrived. There was no escape, no more lies that could save me. "It was time to face the truth, Tom," I said, tears running down my cheeks. I've been having an affair with Jack. I'm so sorry. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Tom's face go from confusion to pain and finally to anger. Jack remained standing, silent, as if suddenly realizing the magnitude of what he had done. How long? Tom asked, his voice barely a whisper. Months, I replied, unable to look him in the eye. Tom collapsed on the couch, his face in his hands. The weight of my betrayal seemed to crush him. I love her, Jack intervened, breaking the silence. We wanted to be together, but— Shut up, Tom shouted, jumping up. You have no right to be here. Get out of my house. Jack looked at me, seeking support, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Everything I had feared was happening before my eyes, and it was worse than I had imagined. Sarah, Jack said, his voice pleading. Let's go. Let's leave all this behind. We can start over together. For a moment, I considered his offer to run away, to leave behind all the pain and shame. But as I looked at Tom, I saw everything I was about to lose. Years of history, trust, a love that, although it had cooled, was still real. I can't, Jack. I finally said, I'm sorry, but I can't go with you. I saw hope fading from his eyes, replaced by a mix of pain and resignation. Without saying another word, he turned and left the apartment, closing the door behind him. I was left, alone with Tom, the silence between us loaded with unspoken emotions. Finally, I gathered the courage to look at him. Tom, Don't say anything, he interrupted me. I don't want to hear your excuses, not now. He got up and headed to the bedroom. I followed him, fearful of what he might do. What are you going to do? I asked, seeing him take a suitcase out of the closet. I'm leaving, he replied, without looking at me. I need time to think, to process all this. Please, I begged. We can talk about this. We can fix it. He stopped for a moment, his eyes meeting mine. I saw in them a mixture of pain, anger, and what hurt me the most, disappointment. Fix it? He asked bitterly. How are we supposed to fix this, Sarah? You've been living a lie for months. You've betrayed our trust, our marriage. I don't know if there's anything to fix. His words hit me hard because I knew he was right. I had destroyed something precious, something that maybe I could never recover. I watched him pack in silence, unable to say anything more. When he finished, he headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned to me one last time. I loved you, Sarah, he said, his voice broken with emotion. I hope it was worth it. And with that, he left, leaving me alone with the weight of my actions. The following days were a blur of tears, regret, and loneliness. The apartment, once full of life and shared memories, now seemed like a mausoleum of my failed marriage. Every corner reminded me of Tom, of the life we had built together, and that I had destroyed with my actions. I tried to contact Tom several times, but my calls went straight to voicemail, and my messages remained unanswered. The uncertainty was killing me. Would he ever come back? Had I lost my husband forever? Jack also tried to communicate with me, but I blocked him everywhere. Seeing or talking to him would only make things more difficult. Besides, I realized that what I felt for him wasn't true love, but a toxic mix of lust and the excitement of the forbidden. Now that the bubble had burst, I clearly saw how superficial our connection had been. A week after the confrontation, I received a message from Tom. I'll be home tomorrow to pick up some things. We need to talk. Those simple words filled me with a mix of hope and terror. Would he come to try to fix things or to definitively end our marriage? I spent the night awake, going over in my mind everything I wanted to tell him. I wanted to explain why I had done what I did, although I didn't fully understand it myself. I wanted to beg him to give me another chance, promise him that I would change, that we would be happy again. When he finally arrived, I was surprised by how changed he looked. He seemed to have aged years in just a week. His eyes, once full of love when they looked at me, were now dull and distant. Tom, I began, my voice trembling. He raised a hand to stop me. "Before you say anything, Sarah, I need you to listen to me," he said, his voice firm but tired. "I've spent the last week thinking about us, about our marriage, about everything we've been through together, and I've come to a conclusion." My heart was pounding, fearful of what he might say next. "What you did," he continued, "has hurt me deeply. You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way, but I've also realized that I haven't been the best husband. In recent years, I focused so much on my work, on building a perfect life for us, that I forgot the most important thing, nurturing and valuing what we had." His words surprised me. I didn't expect him to take on part of the responsibility. "That doesn't justify what I did," I said through tears. "I'm so sorry, Tom." "If I could go back." "But we can't go back," he interrupted me. "What's done is done. The question is, what do we do now?" He looked me directly in the eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that he really saw me. Not as the perfect wife I had always tried to be, nor as the traitor I had become, but as the imperfect and human woman I really was. "I love you, Sarah," he finally said, his voice breaking slightly. "Despite everything, I love you, and I think it's worth trying to save our marriage. But it won't be easy. We'll need professional help, and we'll both have to work very hard to rebuild the trust and love we once had." Tears were flowing freely down my face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I had done, Tom was willing to give us, another chance. "I'll do whatever it takes," I promised, taking his hands in mine. "I love you, Tom. I made a terrible mistake, but I swear I'll do everything possible to earn your trust back." We hugged, and at that moment I felt a ray of hope. I knew the road ahead would be difficult and full of obstacles, but I was willing to face them all if it meant saving our marriage. The following weeks and months were a constant challenge. We started attending couples therapy, where we had to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationship. There were moments of pain, anger, frustration, days when it seemed we weren't making progress, and others when we felt we were taking one step back for every 2 steps forward. I had to learn to be completely transparent with Tom, to share my deepest thoughts and feelings, even those that embarrassed me. He, for his part, had to learn to express his needs and not take our relationship for granted. Little by little, we began to reconnect. We started dating again, rediscovering each other. We talked for hours, sharing our fears, our dreams, our hopes for the future. And slowly, very slowly, trust began to be reborn between us. It wasn't an easy or quick process. There were moments when guilt overwhelmed me, when I felt I didn't deserve Tom's forgiveness. There were days when he struggled with his own demons, with the mental image of my infidelity that tormented him. But we remained firm in our commitment to save our marriage. A year after that fateful night when everything came to light, Tom and I decided to renew our vows. It wasn't a big ceremony, just the two of us, our therapist as a witness, and the sincere promises of two people who had been through hell together and had come out stronger on the other side. My story is not over yet. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Back to the story. As we stood there, looking into each other's eyes and promising once again to love and respect each other, I realized how much we had grown, both individually and as a couple. We were no longer the same people who had married years ago. We had matured, we had learned difficult lessons, and now we were consciously choosing to be together with a much deeper understanding of what love and commitment meant. Life went on. We had to move out of that building. The memories were too painful for both of us. We started anew in a new home, one free from the ghosts of the past. Jack became a distant memory, a lesson learned the hard way. Over time, the wound of my infidelity began to heal. It never disappeared completely. It would always be a part of our history, but it stopped being the center of our lives. We learned to talk openly about our feelings, to address problems before they turned into crises. Our communication improved enormously, and with it, our intimacy and connection. 5 years after that night that almost destroyed our marriage, Tom and I were sitting on the porch of our new house, watching the sunset. Our hands were intertwined, a simple gesture but full of meaning. "Did you ever think we'd get to this point?" Tom asked, his voice soft and reflective, I thought, about everything we had been through, how close we were to losing it all, and the hard work we had done to get to where we were now. "Honestly, there were moments when I didn't," I admitted, "but I'm so grateful that we made it." Tom squeezed my hand. "Me too," he said. "You know, sometimes I think that what happened, as terrible as it was at the time, made us stronger. It forced us to face problems we had been ignoring for years." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It forced us to grow, to be better people and better partners. "Exactly," Tom smiled. "I wouldn't change what we have now for anything in the world." As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink hues, I reflected on the journey we had taken. I had made a terrible mistake, one that almost cost me everything I loved. But through pain, repentance, and hard work, we had found a way to heal and grow together. My affair with Jack, which once seemed so exciting and full of passion, now looked like what it really was: a superficial distraction from the deeper problems in my life and my marriage. The real passion, the true love, was what I had built with Tom over the years, what we had fought so hard to preserve and rebuild. I learned that love is not just a feeling, but a choice that is made every day. It's the commitment to be there for your partner in good times and bad. It's the willingness to be vulnerable, to admit your mistakes and work to be better. It's the decision to choose your partner over and over again, even when things get tough. My infidelity was the biggest mistake of my life, but it was also the catalyst for the most significant change. It taught me the true value of honesty, the importance of open communication, and the transformative power of genuine forgiveness. Now, as I look to the future, I no longer fear the challenges that may come. I know that Tom and I can face anything together. We've been through the fire and have come out stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. This is my story, a story of love, betrayal, and redemption, a story that reminds me every day how fortunate I am and how close I came to losing it all. It's a constant reminder that true love requires work, honesty, and commitment, but that in the end, it's worth every effort. As the sun finally disappears on the horizon, I look at Tom and feel a wave of love and gratitude. We've come a long way, and although I know we still have a long road ahead, I'm excited for every step we'll take together, because now I know that true love isn't perfect. It's imperfect, it's difficult, it's complicated, but when two people are willing to fight for it, to grow together, and to forgive, it can be the most powerful and transformative force in the world. And that, after all, is the most valuable lesson I've learned.